Got it. All right, so we're recording and we will share with everybody. So we'll get started. Thanks everybody for coming on. Got a good turnout today, and we're excited to share what we've been working on pretty diligently, and talk a little bit about what's coming up next. So I'm going to go through just some statistical updates, just what we've done recently, as well as let Colin introduce some of the new modeling stuff that he's been working on. There's been some people who just reported that some of the numbers you're getting are a little bit different than other systems, and we think we've adapted an approach to kind of get a little bit more apples to apples there. So Colin's got some really cool videos for that as well. And obviously, the science nerd side of things, super excited about that. When we first started PitchAI, the idea was we could collect data on any throw, and this is kind of the first time we're talking about how we're analyzing some drills. So Lennon and I are going to talk a little bit about like a kind of constraints approach training study that we did. There's been a lot of interest in getting more education, and Casey's on here to talk about his launch of his Kinnetic module, and then Brian and Jeff to take it home and give anybody any information they might need. So far in 2021, we've analyzed 20,289 pitches in the system. So we've made sure that our servers are working hard there. There's been 18,000 player accounts created, either through our portal or through Track. And Tim, I saw you're on there. You're the champ still. You still have the most analyses completed. So everybody give a hand to Tim Campos there. He's been killing it. We've got some new models coming soon, and we're excited to share those with you. So I'm going to turn it over quickly to Colin and let him share his screen, because he's got some exciting stuff on some new models. Some of you would have seen this on Twitter or Instagram recently, but it's his new 53 marker model that we've been working on. So I'm going to stop my screen share, Colin, and it is all yours.
Let's see if I can do mine.
It's working.
You can see mine. Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So let's get this plan. All right. So basic rundown here. So what we're looking at, I wanted to basically take you through the very basic steps of how PitchAI works and kind of what is the modeling process. So in kind of the first panel there with the one, so this is where you guys upload your 2D video directly from your phone. And then the first step is to use some computer vision technology and create a basic 2D skeleton. And this is essentially what you see in the overlay. So this is looking at the video frame by frame, tracking and estimating where are each of the joint centers. And then we can take that original video, overlay that skeleton onto it, and we get this nice, pretty overlay video. The next step, and this is where the heavy computation comes in, is to add a depth dimension to that 2D model and make it a 3D model. And so to do this, we have a large database of paired video and 3D motion capture data. So the video, again, is going to give us that 2D skeleton. And then with the mocap, we have a full 3D marker set, typically ranging from 30 to 100 markers, depending on the lab and the detail that uses segments. So this uses a computational neural network approach. I won't bore you much with that, but essentially what that does is add that third dimension and creates this 3D model. And that 3D model is what we're using for all the joint angle calculation stuff. So all the numbers coming out of here, this is all from that 3D model. So what we're going to see in the near future is some minor changes, well, major and minor, depending on how you look at it, changes to that 3D model. So on the left, you see our current model and what you've been using in the past with PitchAI. But in the next little while, we're going to see what you see on the right there. So in our current model, we have 19 joint centers. So essentially we're looking at heels, toes, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, wrists, as well as a couple torso markers and the head. And we're using all that to calculate the motion throughout the pitch movement. Just a little bit on how the angles are calculated. And we've talked a lot in the past about kind of this apples to oranges comparison. What you calculate in PitchAI is reliable, but is not necessarily going to have the same magnitudes as what you see in a 3D biomechanics lab. And so if we think of the elbow, just as an example, an easy way to calculate elbow angle would be to look at a vector from the elbow to the shoulder and from the elbow to the wrist, and look at basically just the angle, 3D angle between those two vectors. The elbow is a nice joint. We would call it a hinge joint. It can flex and extend, but if you hold your upper arm still, you can't really rotate it side to side in any sort of normal motion. But as we know, pitching is certainly not a normal biomechanical motion. We get lots of heavy torques happening. And so we do see some medial lateral motion of the elbow. In our new model on the right here, what we're going to do is, using a neural network approach, produce a 53 marker skeleton. And what this allows us to do is, rather than just use these basic vector angles, which are prone to a little bit of error and a little bit of magnitude difference, we can now calculate angles in the same way you would in a 3D biomechanics lab using some Euler decomposition, just to throw some nerd terms out there. And so what this will mean to the end user, you guys, is that we should see angles that are closer to what you would see in a 3D motion capture lab. Now, the shapes of the curves shouldn't change very much, but what you will see is, especially at the peaks of the motion, some minor increases or decreases of those magnitudes. And again, this is getting closer to a mocap lab. So I think the recommendation here would be still keep the analysis or comparisons within PitchAI. We're not quite at the point where you can compare directly to a mocap lab, but we're getting very close to that. If you're doing a comparison where you say you have a pitch with the old model and a pitch with the new model, you might see some differences in the magnitudes. So the recommendation would be take the old pitch, run it through the new model. So at least we're comparing the same model outcomes on your different pitches. I'd hate to see, you know, an old model says a guy's throwing with 130 degrees of external rotation at max, and then the new model says it's 145. Even if you have the same pitch, right? So you want to make sure you're using the same model to analyze multiple pitches if you're doing those sorts of comparisons.
And I know one thing that was brought up was making sure that we include which model number is on the videos. So in the future, we're going to have it in the bottom corner. It will say which model your analysis was done on, just so that you can be consistent.
Yeah,
Exactly. You'll have that info.
You can see that little number here if I move my cursor away. This same kind of information box is in the top left of the overlay video that you guys see. So that version number will be in there. So you'll be able to track which version you use to perform your analyses. A couple other major changes. The existing model uses a one-stage depth prediction algorithm. All that's meaning is it's using the entire pitch sequence, every frame from the entire pitch sequence to predict that depth measurement, whereas the new model uses a two-stage method. So essentially, I'm taking frames from the start of the pitch to foot plant and foot plant to the end of the pitch and breaking it into two separate models. So again, this just improves the accuracy of that 3D depth measurement or calculation. And then the final thing is the torque values that are coming out. Torque hasn't been as stable as I had hoped. Currently, we're using an estimation approach. So again, it's using a neural network and feeding in the joint angles and angular velocities, and then with some training data, estimating what the elbow torque is. But now with this 3D or expanded 3D marker set with 53 markers, we can actually calculate the biomechanical torque as we would in a mocap lab. So again, you're going to see improved accuracy of those torque values. So as users, what should you expect to see? Again, very minor differences in the joint angles and angular velocities. Curves profiles should stay the same. Just at the peaks, you might see some differences in those magnitudes. Very minor. It's not like you're going to see 50-degree differences. We're talking in the neighborhood of 5 degrees kind of differences. As much as I always push for higher frame rate video, the higher the frame rate, the better the analysis is going to be. Low frame rate videos, so a regular 30 hertz video is very subject to motion blur, and that's going to affect the quality of the analysis. We do have some improved frame rate predictions for the low frame rate videos. So I say that what that's going to mean is it's going to produce better results for, say, a 30 frames per second video. But again, higher is better. So use the slow-mo setting on your phone if you are uploading your own videos through the app. That shouldn't be a problem. More stable torque values, as I mentioned. And then the last big one, Mike, I don't know if you've mentioned this much before, but we're going to have a new overlay implemented into the system. So when you're going through the app or web portal, in that environment, you'll still see that same overlay video where it's just kind of continuous, no freeze frames throughout the pitch. But really for a social media advantage, what we want is to be able to have a video, and when you upload it or post it or download it and share it with people, we want some of the angle and joint metric information to come out with the video. So we've adapted that overlay, and it pauses at these keyframes during the pitch sequence and displays some of the key information right on the video. So that kind of packages it as an all-in-one solution to PitchAI to share with teammates, coaches, friends, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we're expecting that's probably going to be within the next week or two, probably within the next week to get that into the app. So basically, the way it'll work is if you're watching your video in the app, it's just going to play straight through. But if you're downloading it to send by message, that's where you'll see that other overlay.
Yeah, so just some technical stuff there, but all in all, basically what you're going to see some minor differences in the angle outcomes, an improvement definitely, but everything else should work the same. From a user perspective, you don't have to do anything different. This is just ProPlayAI. We're kind of always striving to improve the accuracy of PitchAI and our other tools. So incrementally, we're getting better and better and better. And this is just kind of a big change. That's why we wanted to present some of these differences here.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin.
Yep.
All right. So I'm gonna jump in now. How these things all kind of come together, right? Are that we make all these really technical changes so that it becomes easier to interpret the more simplistic things. So you want to see how a drill impacts mechanics, we can be confident in how that measurement's been done. So Lennon and I have been collecting some data and going through some analysis on different constraints and how they have impacted mechanics. So I'm going to go through a couple of these things and then let Lennon take over. So the idea behind constraint-based training is that you modify the requirements of the individual, the task, or the environment, and then that will lead to changes in the performance of a task. It could be something as throw the ball as far on as high of an arc as you can, or begin facing a certain direction and then turn to throw, or actually attaching a physical apparatus to your body to ensure that you have to perform a movement in a certain way. And the idea of this is that once you've completed a task with a certain constraint, it will kind of program your body to feel a certain way, and when you perform the task without that constraint, those improvements carry over. So you develop a feel for a specific movement pattern, and then it allows you to more easily adapt when that constraint's removed. Now, the idea we had here was that we wanted to look at a few specific constraint drills that Lennon and BDG have been using, and see if they actually make a an impact to the player's mechanics. So BDG did a whole bunch of science, collected a whole bunch of data on a bunch of different participants, and we've got some of those findings here. So Lennon,
Yeah,
I'll let you take over.
Yeah. So essentially we tested two main constraints and then compared that back to a pitch. So you're going to see this GIF playing, and basically the two constraints that we did was a drop step and a janitor drill. If you guys aren't familiar with that, essentially those are two drills that have kind of been popularized by Driveline over the years. And the drop step is essentially trying to set up with your entire back toward the target. And the janitor is more of a modified version to that, where there's less linear momentum. And if you go to the next slide, Mike, it kind of shows the setup of the two drills. So you'll see, just because the GIF plays really quickly, the janitor drill, you're kind of anchoring on that back foot, but really counter rotating the whole trunk. The drop step, you're completely counter rotating the whole body, and then adding a bit of linear momentum where you're taking a step toward the target. And then obviously the pitch is just a regular pitch. But why we really wanted to do these two drills as our first things was because, first and foremost, they're probably the most used drills that we have. And secondly, they're relatively easy to perform and to kind of teach to a novice athlete. All we're really doing is changing the setup for the athlete and letting that basically be the constraint. So we don't have to cue them, entirely differently. We don't have to set up an entirely different environment, right? They're able to just still have the similar feeling that they have in a pitch, but just trying to change the setup of their trunk positioning and kind of the overall positioning. You can go to the next slide, Mike. In terms of kind of how we went about testing and some of the information that we collected, we basically tested a group of 11 athletes. All of these guys were, in my opinion, pretty advanced to elite level guys. We have a guy in that group that was up to 96 miles per hour this offseason, a guy that's been 93, a bunch of guys that have been like upper 80s. So pretty good population to test stuff on. And then the biggest thing that I was focused on was trying to do data collection as representative to training as possible. So you'll see that I listed there, like we basically captured anything above 70% RPE. And then, all the way up to max effort, basically in testing. So that spanned from January until now. And then we basically asked athletes to go about their regular training, kind of session as they normally do, and then ask them to perform a couple of pitches at the same perceived intensity as those drop steps and the janitors. And then, for the purposes of this, all the data was collected using 5-ounce baseballs, nothing with weighted balls and whatnot. So, like I said, the biggest thing there is we're trying to get as representative to a training atmosphere as possible, because, as Mike has kind of said in the past, that's one of the really coolest things about PitchAI is that I don't have to strap on markers to an athlete. I don't really have to interfere at all with their training. We can literally kind of be a fly on the wall and almost collect data without them even knowing. So really good opportunity to see, how these drills influence mechanics without really a lot of prep work or et cetera. So Mike's going to go through some of the analysis of what we found, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit more about some individual athlete scenarios.
Thanks, Lennon. So with anything involving a kinematic sequence, there's basically two things that you're looking to do. You're trying to either influence the athlete's positioning, or you're trying to influence the athlete's timing. So the first thing that we looked at here was in the timing space. And, I've done a ton of reading in this recently, really excited for what Casey's going to present later, because we've done a lot of breakdowns of research and our data to try and understand the kinematic sequence better. And one of the biggest things that we found is that in elite athletes or high velo throwers, they are able to delay their peak trunk rotational velocity to later in the pitch cycle. So what we found with both the janitor and the drop step was that they had slightly delayed that trunk rotation velocity to later in the cycle. And you can see it's not a huge amount, but it is definitely a significant amount in terms of how much of a delay we were seeing from these drills. So the interesting thing there, and I don't have any of the graphs here, is that the arm action didn't change. You know, we saw the same kinematics for the shoulder, the elbow, the rest of the trunk, but we were able to delay that timing there. Now, one thing to kind of note in this case though is that we did see kind of, I guess, what you would cue as opening up earlier, and a greater trunk angle kind of across the board with the drop step and the janitor there. So that athlete was opening up a little bit sooner in their pitch cycle when they were doing these constraint drills, as opposed to back to a normal pitch. So these drills were, they were actually doing what we intended. They were changing the timing and they were changing the athlete's positioning. And I think we can break this down a little bit further, and I'll let Lennon kind of explain person by person what we saw here. But there's some exciting things, I think, for how you can use this in your training.
Yeah, and one of the important things to kind of touch on, building off of Mike there, is that for a lot of these athletes in that group, some of them, it was their first time performing one of these drills. So one of the other things that we're going to try to dive into in the future is see how this can kind of transfer back to the pitching motion and do more analysis in that regards, as well as more of longitudinal stuff to see if an athlete improves at the drill over time. But obviously, everybody on this call kind of knows that certain drills are going to work better for certain athletes. But now with PitchAI, we actually have a way to quantify that. And something we're going to dive into here is a little bit of how big of variance there is between athlete to athlete. And I put up this tweet thread that I kind of posted a couple weeks back, because I ended up, as we were kind of first looking through some of this analysis, I ended up having a conversation with my colleague, Tyler Dobos, who's on this call. And we were talking about just one of these athletes in particular, athlete number 4 on this graph in the tweet. He, unbeknownst to himself, he kind of performed the janitor drill for the first time just for the purposes of this data collection, never really did it. And the reason being that he didn't really fit our mental model at the time for being a guy that should perform a janitor drill, right? And we had him do it just because of the data collection. And we went through some of the analysis and we saw some really interesting things with hip shoulder separation at foot plant. And we saw that, I think he ended up having about 20 degrees more of hip shoulder separation at foot plant, and being a guy that doesn't necessarily have low hip shoulder separation in the drill, kind of made us start going through this rabbit hole in this conversation of maybe we need to start using drills as more of a diagnostic tool to tease out self-organization for the athletes, as opposed to always being hyper-focused about prescribing drills to athletes, and more trying to find the drill for the athlete, as opposed to giving athletes the drills themselves, if that makes sense. So you can go to the next slide here, Mike, and this is a further breakdown of kind of that initial graph that I had. And this is all 11 athletes that we collected data on, their hip shoulder separations at foot plant between all the drills, right? And then in the top right hand corner, you'll see kind of the global averages. And you'll see that really the global average for all of the drills is pretty similar. There's not a huge ton of change there, but you'll see, athlete to athlete variance. There's a couple of really interesting things that we can kind of pick out. Probably the first thing that you're going to see is like athlete 5, right? The janitor drill with athlete 5 apparently doesn't work, right? Or he's just not good at the drill. So maybe that's a fault on us as coaches, where we're not cueing that drill properly, or maybe it's a fault on himself for not understanding it and it being his kind of first time doing it. And then you'll also see athlete 2, right? Pretty low hip shoulder separation, lowest in the group with the pitch. And both of those drills were accomplishing kind of exactly what we wanted to, of putting him in a better position at foot plant. And we're going to further break down that on the next slide here and look at an individual case scenario. If you want to go to the next slide, Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in something that I kind of noticed. Sorry to go off script, Lennon. It's like the guys who had good hip to shoulder separation at foot plant, it's almost like the drill didn't change them too much. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like if they were good at it, it wasn't really impacting them all that much. But the guys who maybe weren't as good at it, they saw a lot of change as a result of the drill.
Right. Yeah. So in athlete 2, I think this is a really interesting case scenario to see the strength of constraints, because the timing kind of worked out perfectly for us. He ended up coming up to see us for an assessment about a month ago, and we were able to collect some initial data and put that in this kind of whole data batch that we had. And what you'll see is basically during his assessment, he came in, was throwing 74 miles per hour, was also complaining about a lot of arm pain at the time as well. You'll see that hip shoulder separation was pretty low at foot plant. And the biggest thing here, though, that you'll see is some of the arm action kinematics were quite low, right? Shoulder ER at foot plant was, 51 degrees. His total MER was very low. And even though Mike talked about across the board, we didn't see a lot of variance in the arm action kinematics with these drills. What we did with this athlete was we kind of picked out the metrics that we wanted to target and then added another variation onto the janitor drill. So if we kind of familiarize ourselves with the janitor, we're trying to target some of that hip shoulder separation and the trunk velocity in the throw. And then what we did with this athlete is that we constrained his arm action into what I would call like an arm up variation, which is basically to say is that we like preset him with his arm at 90 degrees of shoulder abduction and kind of 0 degrees of external rotation. And we had him go through a month of training with that, and then we reassessed him at the very end. And what you'll see is that kind of through those two different constraints is we actually, targeted that shoulder ER and that hip shoulder separations kind of simultaneously and got him into a better position at foot plant and at MER, leading to some more velocity. Obviously, there's a lot more that kind of goes into it, and there's a lot more that you can unpack, throughout that entire month, right? I'm not trying to say that, we simply changed mechanics and we cured arm pain. That's way too simplified of a view, but I think it does highlight some of the importance that these constraint drills can have is that you can hone in on particular metrics, try to think about ways that we can constrain the athlete into targeting each of those in the pitching cycle. And then again, the power of PitchAI is just test and retest, see if it works or if it doesn't. And in this case, right, we see that in training, with the janitor with the arm up, we were able to target those metrics. And then when we reassessed him a couple of days later, some of those metrics still changed, right? It wasn't as much of a change that the drill was eliciting, but we were able to trickle over and transfer some of that back to the pitching delivery, which I'm pretty excited about.
Not to put him on the spot here, and Tyler, you're more than welcome to stay in silence because I'm sure you're doing other things at the same time. But how much did the kind of on table assessment indicate anything here too? Because one of the things that we've talked about, right, is you can't prescribe a drill if the person's not capable of doing that. How much of that kind of clinical assessment played into this? And Lennon, feel free to comment if you know anything. Otherwise, Tyler, we can bring you in.
So I think you should be able to hear me now.
Yep.
Honestly, more than I expected. And it's something that we've seen throughout, continued use of this, is that the numbers are lining up pretty well. We haven't really dug into them too much yet as far as quantifying that relationship, but visually it lines up pretty well. And just off, basic looking at the numbers between goniometers and between the ranges that are being produced by PitchAI, there's a lot of agreement. So that's definitely one of the things on our list to keep checking and keep validating. But so far, it's been exceptional.
Right. Yeah. And just to provide a little bit more context too, this guy came in during his assessment, and I believe spinal rotation was really bad during the assessment from the movement perspective, as well as a couple things in his arm. So not only are we attacking, some of these mechanical changes from the pitching mound side of things, right? We're also attacking it from the mobility perspective and kind of taking that holistic approach. And that's why we see some of these crazy changes, is that kind of we're attacking the range of motion deficits that we're seeing off the mound. And then as that starts to improve, we're then honing in and trying to target those ranges in the actual throwing motion. And that's what's leading to some of these changes.
Awesome. Thanks, Lennon. And thank you, Tyler, for your on the spot responsiveness there. I think everybody's known by this point in time in these webinars, you could get called on at any time. So I apologize for that. Before we move forward, anybody have any questions for Lennon and I on what we did here, or anything up until this point? And you can use the chat or even just unmute yourself, whatever's easiest. Okay.
I have one.
Sure.
I think you kind of mentioned this in either the tweet thread or something else, but Lennon, at what point are you looking at it to say with the drill, yes, this drill is good for the guy, we haven't taught it yet, or no, that we need to move on to a different drill because he's not getting it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's something that we're still trying to evaluate. And I think a lot of that is going to come down to knowing the athlete. And this is kind of where, like, you can't just view the data as the numbers, unfortunately, right? You have to kind of know the athlete in particular. And, maybe, we've had this example with a couple of guys where we go in and we test some of these drills with them. The results are not what I would expect or what I would want to see. And then I kind of look myself in the mirror and be like, all right, you know what? I just need to be a better coach on this next session and actually help this athlete more, as opposed to just being a scientist and taking video, right? So I think it's a hard job at times, kind of knowing when to move on from a particular drill. I would say this is the benefit of why we're using PitchAI to test these drills, right? Trying to incorporate it and bake it into our assessment process so that we just have more data points to draw on and, go back and reevaluate yourself as a coach. Did I do my job today? Did I help the athlete perform this drill effectively or not? And then, track various cues that you use, et cetera, and see how successful they were.
Hey guys, this is Bill. I had a quick question. Could this also be used in a way to point out if the athlete can't do the drill, it may not be that necessarily the drill is not good for the athlete. It could be that the athlete has weaknesses or deficiencies that don't permit him to do that drill, which would take you down a different path, correct? Which would be, enhancing his stability or instability, or identifying his instability before moving back towards a drill track, if that makes sense.
No,
Right.
it makes perfect sense,
Yeah.
Bill. Makes absolutely perfect sense, and that's kind of what I was asking of Tyler there, and even Casey will talk about it. Lennon talks about it all the time. Like, it's challenging to get people to perform a drill if their body is not capable of performing that drill, right? And when people ask us about, okay, can we use the app, and all of a sudden you get magic 5 miles an hour for every athlete, like, it's not the case. Like, the mechanics are one part of this, but making sure that that athlete is strong and that athlete can move well, it's a combination of all three things. If you set a foundation of a strong athlete who's got good mobility, then now it's time to go in and look at their mechanics and see if you're getting the most out of that. Cool.
I had a question. With the study of the 11 athletes, was that them throwing a pitch and then executing the 2 drills and then throwing another pitch, or was there, a time variable and like a learning potential there, right? What are some of those? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So maybe I didn't do a good job of that. I mean, basically what we did is, like, as athletes trained, we just took video. So
Okay.
there was tons of variance in terms of, like, them doing a pitch and then doing a bunch of drills versus them doing a bunch of drills and then taking up pitches. So it kind of changed day by day. And we just try to make it as representative of a typical training atmosphere. So sometimes we had athletes perform, 5 janitor throws in a row, and then, hey, try a pitch on this next one, right? Stuff like that. So we're kind of trying to dive in, with further analysis of breaking that down more so that we can see what actually was happening. That's kind of what I was mentioning. But initially our goal was just to, kind of keep the video running and see what we get.
If we were designing like a true experiment, we would have set up a Latin square there, got a good order thing going on,
right?
Everything like that. But this is kind of what we're trying to do is biomechanics in the wild, and that's the data that they got, and I think this represents what we saw in an actual training environment.
I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. I'm kind of watching to see if any mutes go off, but I think if we've got any other questions, Casey's gonna just add some stuff now, and then we can add at the end. Lennon, as always, thanks, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
All right, so I'm gonna bring on Casey now, and he's gonna talk a little bit about his Connect module. Casey, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Is good.
Cool. At some point, I want Kevin to zoom in on his dog more, because that thing looks like it's having a good time in the truck.
All right, Mike, we see on my screen here the website.
Yep.
Perfect. So a couple things here I want to break down, give you guys an idea. I know we've been kind of leading this Connect series for a little while. You know, it's kinneticprobaseball.com's website. I'll put it in the chat in just a minute. But on our education tab here, this is our Connect series. Really about 2 years ago, we launched this, a little over 2 years ago now, we launched this. And we had the idea that we wanted to try to create these modules with kind of industry leaders in certain categories. And so right now we're up to our 4th module, which will be our mechanics module we're dropping. And the goal is to really kind of create a path, which, you know, you guys as coaches or players can go in and actually see, you know, how to kind of think through some of this. What does that mind map, so to speak, look like? Ultimately, our goal as a company is to create a predictive model. That's really the backbone of Kinnetic Pro, what we're really working toward. We're going to pull all of these modules independently together to create a predictive model in the future. That's kind of what we're hoping to get to. But right now, we're breaking down each one of these modules, trying to create kind of these mind maps and this work through of what these topics mean. So previous to this, we've had our workload module, our VBT module. We just put up our KP bands module. Those will be out in about a month full time to the public. We've been working behind the scenes with some beta partners on that currently. And then we have our mechanics module, which will be releasing tonight at 6 o'clock full time. So I'm going to pop over and kind of pop in, give you guys a view here of what we're doing, kind of how we're doing it. And so one of the things I got feedback from, and I'm probably guilty of it as well, is people like to listen, not read. And we put a lot of words on our Connect modules in the past. So in this case, we're looking to, Mike and I have been meeting up every Friday morning. I've been doing a little bit of editing behind the scenes, more of a vlog kind of post. And we've been trying to walk through and explain kind of what are biomechanics and how do we understand this mind map, this process of evaluating a biomechanics report. We wanted to create relevant information in terms of as we release these units. So we're going to release one unit tonight, and then you guys will see probably a secondary unit come up a little bit after, like later in the night or tomorrow morning. And so we'll kind of have these first 2 units out for 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks we'll have our 3rd unit come up. And the 3rd unit will be the first actual breakdown of a specific kind of data point in ProPlayAI, talking about from the kinematic sequence all the way to pelvis to trunk, trying to work through the kinematic sequence and help you guys understand how to evaluate those things independently within the data, what's correlated to velocity from the previous research that's been out there in the past, and then kind of what we've seen from our data sets here at Kinnetic Pro within ProPlayAI, and kind of combining those to what we've seen in the past. So it's really fun. It's an engaging couple of videos. We've passed them off to a couple people, and everybody's given us good feedback so far. It's been nice to, you know, so Friday mornings, Mike and I have been enjoying coffee together and chatting over everything pitching. So it's been nice, but we want you guys to engage here. We want you guys to interact with this, and any questions you have, obviously we want to create a platform where you guys can reach out and kind of engage a little further into trying to figure out your own process through these things. But Mike, I'll pass it back to you. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think the only thing I would add is, you know, we did our intro to pitching mechanics module, and this is kind of the next step. So for those of you that said this was fantastic and it was a great foundation, you know, if you're ready to build on that, that's what Casey and I have tried to do here, is kind of take the next step into educating on mechanics there. So I've been very, very impressed by Casey's video editing skills, and I'm excited for everybody else to get get absolutely enthralled by what he can do with Final Cut Pro. Cool. All right. I'm going to share once again. Cool. And turn it over to Brian and Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I think so. We have a good audience today, and it's a mix of current users, and I see a lot of new names too. So with the current users, I want to make sure everyone's getting the most out of the resources that we're providing. So just to, again, like Mike just mentioned, we have the intro to PitchAI biomechanics course. We also have our Slack community, quite a few videos on our YouTube channel, including how to get the best videos. So I think that's important. So if there's anything that you guys need for our current users, please reach out. Please check out those resources, the Slack community. I mean, feel free to either privately message us or, add to the community as you have questions. I think it's important that we learn from each other. We've mentioned this a bit, but, maybe some of you haven't joined yet, and I think it's beneficial. And like I said, feel free to post anything, any question that you have in there, because I think it's the more of the users contributing, the better, and the more we're going to continue to learn. As for the new people on the call today, Jeff and I are happy to set up a call or demo to further go through everything that the platform offers. Even if you've had maybe some demos or calls before but want to learn more, we're happy to set that up anytime. And so we have our emails there, and that's the best way to go about it. Email us, and then we'll set up a time based on your schedule to do that demo or even just a phone call to further discuss the product.
Or if you just want to talk to Jeff or Brian, just ask them how they're doing. Everybody
good.
asks, what are they doing? Nobody asks, how are they doing? So.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mike, if you just want to pop to the next slide for 1 sec as well. As Brian was saying, like, our Slack channel really is something that we want to get more activity in. So I want to shout out Barrett, who's put a few questions in already. Really what we're trying to do is, have coaches work together and have us join in and help your athletes get to the next level, whatever that is for you. So really, the more engaged you are, the more value everyone gets out of it. And from some of the questions I've gotten from coaches who are using the platform or considering using the platform, there's a lot of similarities in what you guys are looking for, be it more education, better understanding of the data. And really, we hope that the Slack channel can turn into a place where all those answers are in one spot for you to kind of have that one-stop shop. And, Mike's on there, Brian's on there, Len and Casey, myself, we're here for you. And the more that you're active and engaged, the more everyone will get out of it. So, feel free to keep tabs on our YouTube channel as well, social media we're posting. But yeah, would love to hear all your guys' feedback and questions, because that's how we improve as well. And that's how our product gets better and how in the end, you get the most for yourself and your athletes. So looking forward to seeing you guys put more questions in, put more thoughts in, and seeing where this can go.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions maybe for Jeff and I? Like I said, feel free to send us an email too to set up a call or a demo. Okay. Cool.
Awesome.
How you doing, guys? How you guys?
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, guys? I got late over here getting in. What is the next thing coming up? So a short one. I know that you guys talk about something, but I couldn't. I was doing something else. What is the new thing in the future in the couple months? A short one, just to make sure.
I think maybe
the new ideas.
What's up, Brian?
What were you talking about? The new model?
Yeah. something real quick, yeah, because I heard half of it, but I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I
and
know that-
I'll send out the entire webinar too, so you could view that. But
Okay.
if Mike, if you want to touch on it real quick on.
Just a real quick one, yeah.
Yeah, Colin's new model, we're expecting to be in testing by the end of the week.
Okay, with those
and then probably-
exercises that he shows, the exercise that I saw. Okay.
So like what we were talking about with like Lennon's, with those different drills and that, you can do that now. You can do that now.
Okay.
Like you can analyze that type of a throw.
Okay. So pretty much that situation on it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm combining ProPlay with Muscle 2. I don't know if you guys know about it. It's an app that shows you every part of the body. You can build the strength a little bit more. I think that app have a little bit also biomechanics exercises. So
Okay.
so I comparing those things, combine it with the Rhapsody, the whole three things. And also that's kind of helping me out to build I'd say it again. Every kid that I have doesn't know how to pitch. I'm starting from scratch. So I'm trying to build every information you guys put up. Everything has been great. So
Awesome.
I find out that a new app for the muscle, so you can combine it with PitchAI and also see the results in the Rhapsody at the end of it.
That makes a lot of sense, right? Like, and that's kind of going to what that earlier question was about. Like, you know, you got to make sure that people are strong. There's a lot in there. You know, you want people to, you know, have a certain set of mechanics or work towards something, but you got to make sure the foundation is there. So that's very much in line.
That was kind of you guys talked about today, you know, kind of what that was the information about it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate it.
And Mike, we're gonna have a mobility module, right, at some point?
Yeah, we're testing some of that stuff now with some like vertical jump, broad jumps, squats, a few different range of motion type tests. So that's we're working through some of that stuff as we speak. So hopefully that's out within the next month or two, probably closer to 2 months, depending on how much Colin needs to sleep.
I don't need sleep. That's fine.
Okay, good. Cool.
Yeah, anyone else have any questions or anything for any of us?
Yeah, I have a question. You guys can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, question. You just mentioned that you're thinking about different drills like squats, jumps. So you expect to have your stuff synchronized or connected to any hardware?
In that case, we're looking at purely like the kinematics in that sense, or some timing, like with vertical jump, it'd be like your jump height and that. The same approach, all video based.
Okay, got it.
I got a question for Lennon. This is Compost. So when you were doing some of those the constraint-led constraint drill analysis, have you looked like? I think it'd be really interesting to do like, I don't know, like maybe 3 or 4 of the, let's say, the janitor throws, and then get on a mound and pitch, and then I guess do like a pre mound pitch and then a post, and then to see. It's kind of like I've always thought about this ever since Ron kind of first talked about the concept way back called the blending concept, you know, and to see, you know, hey, is blending actually taking place, or is it something negative? But I thought that would be a really cool thing to kind of test out. And I'll probably try to do some of that this upcoming summer with my college guys. But that's I think it's just fascinating because, you know, I mean, you see blending happen. Like you see it, and I see it bigger in like when you're throwing long toss. Like you got a guy that gets out and is able to throw 320 feet, and he gets on the mound and he throws 80. And you're like, what? There's something wrong here. And then basically, you know, then you take him out on the field and you let him throw 320, and you put a mound and have him step on the mound and throw to a target, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, you know. But so it'd be really cool to try to, I mean, to test that. I just was wondering if you you know, have you tried that at all yet, or is that something you're planning on?
Yeah, so I mean, we've tested that in like isolation in specific athlete scenarios. Like myself, I did it with like the core velocity belt. So that was one of the things we tested a couple months back, and kind of did that pre-post intervention that you're talking about. The thing that like we're pretty excited about is that the data set that we drew on for this analysis is pretty close to like 300 throws. And within that, you know, we have everything kind of collected like in sequence. So we're able to pick out when athletes perform the drills and then when they perform a pitch, if that makes sense. So kind of the next layer of analysis is going to be going in and picking out those instances where blending might have happened, you know, where they did 4 drills in a row and then they did a pitch and do that. So it's kind of in the works, and definitely something that we want to investigate further. I mean, this first initial pass was just trying to see, hey, do drills actually do what we are trying to get them to do? You know, the very basic concept of that. And then this next kind of pass of things is going to be to investigate a little bit further.
Well, that's actually exactly what we were talking about, you know, even before we jumped on the call today, Lennon, is like the idea of doing like a blocked versus a random practice of like, you know, be on the mound and then use a janitor throw kind of in the middle. Don't just do a block of janitor throws, a block of drop steps, and then a block of pitches, you know, mixing those in so that you get those feels intermixed between your different throws.
For sure.
Cool. Any other questions? All right. So I think well, we'll do the normal, and this should be up on YouTube this afternoon. So if anybody wants to rewatch it, they are more than welcome to. Slack channel is there. Got any questions, ask, or if you want to just bug Jeff and Brian directly, you know, any questions you might have, those guys can direct you in the right direction. Cool. Awesome, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
We'll be talking soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.